I'm really excited to have Sandra Kirkland here with us to talk about digital signatures. And what we want to really encourage you to do is to say, feel free to ask questions. I appreciate everybody who's introducing yourself, but ask questions. We'll have some time near the end to ask some questions as well. And also, Sandra's instructing me to say if there's anything that I need to interrupt and chat with her about, we can do that. I also remind you that these webinars are recorded. You could watch this the moment it is done. You can rewatch this whole webinar again if you wanted to. So if you're not sick of us by the end of the hour, then you can just watch it again and again and again until you are. Awesome. Now, these webinars that we put together are all about Royal LePage's promise to you, and that's about maximizing your earning potential by providing you with powerful business tools, access to leads and referrals, and training for all stages of your career that builds your skills and fills your sales pipeline. And thanks to everybody who sent in their questions when they registered. It's really, Sandra, I sent those all to Sandra, and she took them all, and she said, okay, I can address these questions. I can make sure that, we're giving them resources to move on and move further. And, when we talk about these training and tools for all stages of your career, obviously digital signatures is a big part of it. And with that, I don't want to take up too much time, Sandra. I've already taken up my time, have I?
My clock has been ticking for the last 2 minutes, so yeah.
So I do want to introduce Sandra for everybody. Now, Sandra herself has been in the industry for nearly 13 years. And in that time, she's developed a true passion for many aspects of the industry. If you are on some of the Facebook groups that I'm on with Sandra, she's always answering realtors' questions, giving them more insight, giving them different perspectives. So I was really excited to have her here on this. And that's because from early on, she was really an unofficial mentor at her branch in Oakville, Ontario, and developed a really strong reputation as a knowledgeable resource for best practices and all the emerging industry trends. Oh my God, Sandra, I can't read anymore. My brain is going off. But you see that if you follow her, if you see her on Facebook, and I had her little Facebook page here as well. You can see how she's helping the realtors really from all over. And that's also factored into her 2 successful terms as the director of OMDREB and currently sitting term as director of MREB, or the Mississauga Real Estate Board. In 2017, Sandra moved into a more formal leadership role. She accepted a position as manager broker with a branch of Royal LePage Real Estate Services Limited in Mississauga, and has found her professional calling. Just before the call, I was like, is she getting on? Is she getting on? What's going on? And she was like, I had a realtor in the office who wouldn't let me go. So she knows what it's like. But that tells you a lot about Sandra as a person, and as far as somebody who wants to help out, who wants to let people get as much as they possibly can from her time. And I really want to thank you in advance, Sandra, for coming in here and giving us your time and helping us.
Well, geez, Mike, I'd be blushing if I hadn't written everything that you just wrote, or you just read. So thank you.
I ad-libbed some. So yeah, so like I said, we got a lot of people coming in, more people coming in as it's going. Halliburton, St. Thomas, Saskatoon, home of the Rush National Lacrosse League champions. Awesome. So let's get started. Let's talk digital signatures.
Cool. Well, I'm going to go in and share my screen because I've got a slide deck that I've been working on here. So we'll just pop this up and make that full screen. So hopefully everybody's able to see that. So digital signatures have been something that I've been really firmly planted in that wheelhouse for the last number of years. It's going to be a little bit different for me to deliver a session like this and to deliver information like this, to knowing that I'm speaking to realtors from across the entire country. I'm used to really delivering information based on realtors in Ontario and what our rules and our regulations are. So you'll have to forgive me if I'm not able to answer a lot of questions, especially for those of you logging in from across the country, out in the West Coast, maybe out in the East Coast. But I do have some ways that you'll be able to more easily find some of the answers that I may not be able to answer for you in this session. So digital signatures in Ontario have actually only been legal on the agreement of purchase and sale and the accompanying documents since 2015. It was actually July 1st, 2015. Maybe it was June 1st. I actually don't remember. One of the J months. And I think, and if you're about to prove me wrong, please hold your tongue because I don't want to be proven wrong on this, but I think that I might have been the first realtor in Ontario to have my buyer client sign an offer legally using digital signatures on that first day that it became legal. It was a Saturday that the law was finally made legit, and my buyer signed an offer that morning at 7:30 in the morning. So if you know of somebody that did an offer earlier that day, please don't tell me, because I like being able to say that I was the first realtor in the province to do digital signatures on the agreement of purchase and sale. That's my big claim to fame. So ever since then, going paperless and using digital signatures entirely changed the face of my business. And I was selling up until, well, I guess it was December of 2017. So I was selling relatively recently and really got to be able to use digital signatures and going paperless in my business to such a great extent. And not only did it actually, I think, win me deals and win me negotiations. And I'll talk about a couple of those stories a little bit later. But it made my business so much more time efficient and cost efficient. And not just my business, but it also made my clients' experience and oftentimes the other realtor and their clients' experience a lot more efficient, calm, more easy to follow through and to understand than traditionally sometimes working with wet signatures with a pen on a piece of paper. Or even, trying to rush around to find a fax or to get to a printer and a scanner and do all of that kind of stuff. This can really revolutionize the efficiencies in your business. So hopefully for those of you that are logging on that have still not yet been able to experiment with digital signatures or are still concerned about their securities, my goal in the next however long we've got until Mike cuts me off, will be to help you guys get started and to figure out how to make digital technology make your business a lot more efficient. And you'll have to excuse me because I do have a little bit of a cough. So I may have to pause every once in a while to sort of cough remotely in my sleeve. So I apologize in advance for that. So let's take a look at e-signatures or electronic signatures, digital signatures. There's a whole bunch of different terms for them. What do all of the terms mean? This is actually the most confusing aspect of digital signature technology, but it needs to still be acknowledged, at least in its most basic sense. So understanding what they are basically is an electronic signature is something that is done on a computer or an electronic device. Generally, you need to be connected to the internet, or in some cases, you don't need to be connected to the internet, but it is any digital format of placing a signature or a stamp or some other symbol on a document that acknowledges your acceptance of that document or of that piece on that piece of paper. So electronic signatures in themselves defines who the person is that's making a signature, what document they're making the signature on, and the intent and consent of that person to place that digital stamp onto a computer. That's pretty widespread. We've been using that in most businesses for the past 15 to 20 years since email became a thing and technology really started to increase. But digital signatures are something a little bit different, and they're an added layer that goes on top of the electronic signature. So apart from who is signing on what document and what that actually looks like or what they're actually signing, the digital signature is the security portion of that really ratifies the authenticity of that actual electronic signature. So the digital signature layer would include things like security through encryption, making sure that it's not tamperable or it's not editable by any third party that wouldn't otherwise be tracked. It also would contain detection of tampering or document alteration. So are you able to determine whether or not the other aspects of that PDF document were altered after the signature was put on? And obviously that is something that is extremely important when we're working in real estate to determine at what point digital documents were changed and then at what point the signatures were placed on them. So digital signatures cover that aspect. And then ultimately it strengthens the signer trust. So all parties can be rest assured from the realtor to the buyer and then ultimately to another cooperating realtor and their clients, as well as to the lawyers, the mortgage brokers, the lenders, the brokerages that employ the realtors, and everybody that's otherwise involved in the trail of real estate can know that by using a secure digital signature on top of an electronic signature, that this is authentic and this is the true version of that person's signature. So let's take a look at the security of digital signatures. In most cases, a properly executed digital signature is more secure than a traditional wet pen on paper signature. So traditionally speaking, when we've got people that are picking up a pen and putting it onto a piece of paper, the best way that you're able to authenticate that is by two methods. A, by a witness, which we, of course, we have a section for or most people have it, most provinces rather, have a section where somebody can sign as a witness to an actual signature. And the second most secure aspect of a traditional pen on paper wet signature is to hire a handwriting expert, which you may have in a court of law if you were to ever contest the authenticity of a signature. So if you have a buyer that's come to you a couple of weeks after they purchased a property and said, I don't want this property anymore, I'm just going to complain that you forged my signature, the best way of being able to determine whether or not that was actually true is to take it to court, hire a handwriting expert who then would analyze the two signatures and determine whether or not that signature was a forgery or whether it was an original. With digital signatures, you don't need to take it to court and you don't need to hire a handwriting expert because it actually has nothing to do with the way that the signature looks. We'll go into detail about that a little while later, but it actually is all about the digital technology that comes along with the act of that person opening an email, reviewing the documents, and then placing their signatures, creating and placing their signature. So in terms of the security, there is all of that we talked about the digital signatures, but most of the popular digital signature platforms that are available and popular with realtors in Canada today will have a variety of other secure functions. Most notably in those would include geo-tracking and IP tracking. So geo-tracking would use the general location of the connection of the internet that the device which was used to sign is on, and would determine, in many cases up to 15 feet accurate, where in the world that person was when they signed that document. So in some of the platforms that you see out there, like DocuSign, Repri, some of the other ones, you're actually able, once the signing session is complete, to click on a link that would then open into a map and show a pin similar to the image that you're seeing here on this slide, exactly where in the world that person was when they made that signature. Some more advanced geo-tracking capabilities in digital signature platforms can even show how high up off the ground the person was. So in many cases, you're going to be able to say, I'm able to prove, again, coupled with the IP tracking, which I also mentioned here, you're actually able to prove in many cases that the person that signed that document at 2:04 p.m. on the Thursday afternoon of, what's today, April, whatever today is, April 11th, that they were on the 4th floor corner office of this particular office building, which we happen to know is actually where their office is and where they sit every day. On top of all of that, we're able to prove by CC camera footage if we needed to, or by witnesses in the office that that person was actually in his office at that time that this document was signed. The IP tracking takes it even a step further, and it will actually determine as well not only what device they're on, so i.e. they were signing on an iPhone X, but they are also able to determine that that iPhone X is registered to a particular user. They're also able to determine that that iPhone X was on the presumably secure Wi-Fi of the office building where that person works. So the chances are that nobody else made that signature at that time except for the intended person, which can be mind-blowing. Traditionally speaking, if you wanted this person to sign, you would probably either email them the document and they would print it out, sign it, scan it, and send it back, or maybe you would fax it, or deliver it by courier or whatever. So when you think about the geo-tracking and the IP tracking on top of all of that, you can start to see the level of added security that digital signatures can have well above and beyond remotely emailing or otherwise sending a copy of a transaction or a document to somebody else and having them sign it. On top of all of that, there's a variety of other security features that you may or may not want to use. Presumably, if you're sending a signing session over to somebody remotely, that they're opening their secure email address that is password protected and not otherwise hacked or open to hundreds of people to be able to access that inbox. Many digital signature providers also allow you to input a PIN code or a password that then you would have to verbally tell that person what their password or their PIN code is in order for them to be able to access, even just to be able to look at the documents, let alone to create and place a signature or some kind of authenticatable stamp onto that document. So these are just some of the many, many, many types of securities out there that digital signatures platforms have. So at the very basic level, if you are interested in adopting digital signatures into your business, you should be really trying to make use of these digital signatures when you're not otherwise physically present with your clients. So if they are at work and you can't go to their work, or if they're away with their family on vacation and you're not able to unfortunately show up in the Dominican and have them sign a document in person, digital signatures are absolutely the most secure, traceable way that you can get somebody's signature on them without being physically in person with them. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't use digital signatures in person as well. Most of the popular digital signature platforms that are available out there today also allow you an option to do in-person signing. Again, we may touch on this a little bit more in today's session, but essentially what that means is that if you are physically present with your client, you can still do digital signatures on your platform and choose the in-person signing method that is probably available on whatever signature platform you've decided to use. That means that instead of you having to run around and find a printer, first of all, and instead of them having to worry about opening their email on your computer and maybe running the risk of feeling like their email was compromised because they were signing into their email on an unsecure computer, or that they're stuck using their old school BlackBerry Bold 3550 trying to navigate through a signing session when you've got a great big beautiful tablet or Surface Pro or MacBook Air in front of you. It's a very easy opportunity for you to be able to use your own device and be able to hand off that device to them in person to allow them to do a signing session. And that is still also extremely trackable and very secure and very acceptable to be used in agreements of purchase and sale.
So Sandra, that leads to one of the questions that we saw a little bit in the chat, and I'll give you a chance to catch a breath there, one of the questions we saw a lot was just around the legality of these, and has there ever, in your knowledge, has there been anything that has gone to court questioned the authenticity of these signatures? Because that seemed to be, some people had some perhaps some anxiety around that. If this digital signature were to go to court, and I think you've addressed it quite well here, saying, like you said, it's even more secure. But has there been a case where this has happened? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm sure that there has been. I'm not aware of anything specific, but I do know that, for example, digital signatures in the agreement of purchase and sale have been legal in British Columbia for over a decade now at this point. So if any of these wrinkles in terms of Canadian federal law needed to be ironed out, they have well been ironed out at this point. I know that in Ontario, when digital signatures first became legal in the agreement of purchase and sale, that there were a couple of, in fact, there were a number of both law firms and lenders that were not accepting paperwork with digital signatures on them.
Mm-hmm.
But really all that meant, we had a realtor actually here in Oakville who adopted digital signatures very early. She did a transaction. I believe she didn't. She was representing the buyers and there was another brokerage representing the sellers. They'd done digital signatures on both sides. So both the listing agent and the buyer realtor used digital signatures for their clients. And it got to be a day or two before closing when the lender called up the buyer and said, our lender isn't accepting digital signatures and we're not going to be able to forward the funds on closing unless we've got proper paperwork. So there was immediately this sort of panic of, oh my God, this isn't going to close. What do we do? And then really all they realized that they had to do was just write up a clean offer and then rush to each other's houses and have them sign them in person. And then the lender was able to release the funds. So there were some issues early on in Ontario, and I'm sure in every other province where they've been legal for longer, that some lenders and lawyers didn't accept them. But I haven't actually heard of any case that has gone to court in terms of the real estate industry and the authenticity of digital signatures in recent years at all. So I don't think that there is an issue in terms of legality to be worried about at all in our industry.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Thank you. I know that's a question that I saw from a lot of people. I think that's some of the anxiety and some of the pushback is, what's going to happen. I do want to address one thing for some people in the chat. They were saying like, all I'm seeing is the security screen. Well, yeah, Sandra's sharing her presentation. So you should be seeing the security and email security, all that stuff. And that gives Sandra a little chance to get a little drink of water as well. So, so thanks for that. No, I think it was an important question. That some people had. And I think it's really important to kind of set their mind at ease about, like you said, it's been out there for a while. A lot of the legalities are actually already sorted out. So thank you.
And again, if you really look back on comparing the two processes side by side, it really becomes mind-blowing just how secure digital signatures are. So when we talk about the email security, first of all, of them opening up their presumably secure email address with a password or whatever, maybe if it's on their phone, then they've got the fingerprint sensor or face recognition sensors on their phone, plus a password protected email account. Then once they open the email, they'll have to click. They need to identify themselves by saying, yes, this is my name, and yes, this is how I want my signature to appear. Most digital signature platforms allow the client the opportunity to choose their signature, and they can either choose from a variety of fonts that are predetermined within the platform, or in most cases, in fact, I don't know of any issue where any platform where you can't draw your own signature. You can use a stylus or your finger or your mouse or your trackpad to actually draw a signature. It's mind-blowing to actually realize that at the end of the day, when you're using digital signatures, it has nothing to do with how your signature appears. For example, if I was using digital signatures and my name is Sandra Kirkland, I could reasonably buy a house and write my name as John Smith using a digital signature platform. And believe it or not, that would be legally binding. 9 times out of 10, probably when most of you guys draw your signature on a piece of paper anyway, it's probably not legible. It doesn't look anything like your actual names. It's a collection of, curly cues and mountains and valleys, and it probably doesn't look anything like your name, but it is your signature. So as long as you have control over saying, this is my stamp, it doesn't have to be your name. It's just a brand, effectively, that you have developed over time. And digital signatures allow you to be able to create that security in a digital aspect rather than with a pen on a piece of paper. Does that make sense?
Unmute. Yes, it does. All right, let's keep going. I'm in. Security, safe.
Perfect. So good. So security is, let me tell you, I promise you that without a doubt, the security of digital signatures is more secure than a traditional pen on a piece of paper. So let's move forward. So let's talk about some of the platforms that are currently available. I'll tell you, there are hundreds. If you were to Google digital signatures, you would get pages upon pages upon pages of Google results. But if you were to go into any of the Facebook groups, chat rooms, forums, walk into your common area at your branch or your brokerage and ask around, some of the more common names that you're probably going to hear mentioned are these ones. So one of the most common that people talk about all the time is DocuSign. They're kind of the Coca-Cola of the digital signature world. They're globally acceptable. They're a massive company in the States. They've got a ton of different departments that work with different industries in terms of digital signatures: banking, securities, real estate, medical. So if anybody was going to do digital signatures to a mass global scale, it's going to be DocuSign. They tend to run the Royal LePage preferred pricing with DocuSign is $259 a year, and that also gets you I've forgotten now, what's the transaction desk platform that DocuSign has in its back end. They do sort of transaction management as well, where you can upload your forms, store them, add your clients in so that it's really easy to be able to run through an entire transaction and probably the dozens of different documents that you're going to have your clients sign over the course of a transaction. So that's $260 a year, thereabouts. Authentisign is another one that a lot of people are talking about. And if you haven't heard of Authentisign yet, you're going to hear about Authentisign in the future because they have recently taken over the CREA contract to be able to provide forms services to CREA members. So I won't go into too much detail about that, but you guys are going to hear a lot more about Authentisign in the future. And for those of you logged on today that are from the Toronto Real Estate Board, members of the Toronto Real Estate Board get access to Authentisign via their Stratus account for free. So that's another added benefit for realtors in the Toronto Real Estate Board area. If you need to buy Authentisign for whatever reason, their prices run anywhere between $69 to $99 per year, depending on which add-on platforms that they provide. EasyMax or EasySign is another platform that is a preferred partner with Royal LePage. They have bundle pricing. You do need to contact them to determine which services you want to apply. You may already have this available in your brokerage because they also provide some back-end services that your brokerage may already have installed. So if you hear about them, then they are also another one that is an acceptable and preferred partner with Royal LePage. Another one that a lot of people already know about as well is Repri. They're one of the few that is also Canadian developed and Canadian owned. They were recently bought out by Next One, which some of you may remember also is Fall Tour. So a lot of brokerages have Fall Tour that they use as their back end platform, their transaction management, how you submit your documents to your brokerage. Repri would be the electronic signature provider that is built into Fall Tour or Next One. Last but not least, one of the most popular ones is the Adobe Suite. They are $120 per year, and they also provide very secure digital signing services as well. So obviously, you're seeing a huge difference in some of the prices that are available. I mean, Rapri is $600 a year versus Authentisign that's $70, so or free if you're a Trev member. So what's the difference between all of these? I'm not going to go into a detailed comparison because I do want to encourage you guys to do your own exploration, but Rapri isn't just a digital signature platform. Rapri is an entirely paper-based transaction management platform that is all built into one login. So they are an approved ARIA forms provider, as well as an approved Alberta Association forms provider, and I believe they have a couple of other provinces that are in the process of signing on to provide their forms directly within the system. So that's a bypass for web forms, for those of you that are frustrated with the frequent downtimes of web forms. Rapri also has a client hub where you can really keep your client up to date on what's happening with their transaction from the moment you first meet them to beyond closing. It is a full transaction management platform and light CRM. So that's why it's a lot more expensive in order to be able to go with something like that. For those of you that are new to digital signatures and trying to figure out which one to fit into your platform, I would strongly recommend starting with Authentisign, because you don't want to invest too much money until you have a firm understanding of how it's going to fit into your own business. And you probably are only going to be using it a dozen or so times over the course of your first year using them as you understand a little bit more about how they fit into your business. So save the money, start cheap, then determine how it's going to fit into your business as it continues to develop in the technology world.
So I've gotten a couple questions in here about these, and some of the questions just around, Suzanne Ottmer from up in New Lisker was saying, next one is Canadian, so they follow the privacy laws. Authentisign, I do believe, is Canadian as well. Is it not?
They are, yeah, they're owned by Lone Wolf.
And EasyMax, I'm not sure about. I'm not 100% sure about. But I guess
is American and Adobe is American. So here's a popular misconception when it comes to document storage. So the law of privacy and storage and PIPEDA and all of those kinds of things that we hear about when it comes to digital transaction and digital computing really is about primarily the brokerage storage of the final versions of documents that pertain to a transaction. So you as a realtor are not required to use a Canadian platform or Canadian-based cloud storage in order to legally do business in the trade in real estate. So that is a popular misconception that people have. It's your brokerage's responsibility to make sure, at least in the province of Ontario, I can't really speak for other provinces, that their storage of documents and client information is kept on a local cloud storage, if it is cloud storage, that is located within the province in which the trade has taken place. So quite a misconception, but you have to understand too that if we were only allowed to store documents on servers that were located in Ontario or that were 100% PIPEDA compliant, that we wouldn't actually be able to use email legally, because every time you email a PDF or a document between yourself and your client, if you're using Gmail, for example, your Royal LePage email, gosh only knows where those servers are stored that house all of your email and all of the attachments that you've attached to emails in the past. So your sent items folder has copies of almost all of the transactions that you've ever done, and that cloud storage is probably located in India, to be honest. So just a ratification there that it doesn't matter if the digital signature platform that you have selected is located within the province that you're doing business in or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a really, really good clarification. We get that question a lot on this. Now, one of the questions that I see or that I know we get regularly about this would be, and I'm seeing some of them coming in, is what about other providers? So for instance, I had somebody ask about DocHub via Google account. And she's like, hey, I've used that for my personal stuff. Can I use that for real estate? So I'll ask you, how important do you think it is to find a digital signature provider that would be specific to real estate?
So tagging on exactly with what we were just talking about in terms of the security and the storage, you have a really strong responsibility as a registrant and as a realtor to make sure that the information that you hold on behalf of your clients in regards to their trades is secure. So if you're using another platform that may be lesser known or maybe a smaller startup or may not have a large user base, make sure that you're reading those terms of service. Where are those documents stored? Who owns the documents once they're stored on their servers? If you were to ever cancel your account with them, would you have access to everything that is being stored, and do they scrub them after they provide you with access? And most importantly, when it comes to digital signatures, is it a true digital signature? Or is it, going back to our original slide, is it just the electronic signature portion without the digital signature portion? And it is your responsibility as a realtor and as a registrant in your province to make sure that the platform that you use is the most secure that it could possibly be. So provided I'm not familiar with that company that comes through Google, provided that fits this digital signature requirement, and generally would come with some sort of certificate of authentication, which we'll also talk about shortly, and is approved by your brokerage, because ultimately that's who has to approve it, then I would venture to guess that you can feel confident that in the choice that you've made in your digital signature platform. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Sandra.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on. So the benefits of using digital signatures, obviously, first and foremost, is convenience. The reason why you're using digital signature is for a variety of levels of convenience, not only because it saves you filing storage, because you now no longer need to worry about adding yet another filing cabinet into your already cramped office or hallway, but the convenience of also being able to save that time. For those of you that have been in the business longer, maybe you should give me a show of hands down in the comments. How many of you remember the days where at 11 o'clock at night, you're rushing out to your buyer's house to get some quick initials on a piece of paper because the conditions expire in 59 minutes? I know that there's been many times where I've been driving around at all hours of the night getting those last minute signatures, and digital signatures allow you to be able to do that from the comfort of your bed with your bunny slippers and your house coat on, and being able to quickly do that in an email. Alternatively, your clients can also make those signatures in their bed, on their phone, with their bunny slippers and house coats, or in the bath if that's what they want to be doing. So the convenience is definitely one of the most appealing aspects of converting to digital signatures.
You're getting a lot of yeses here, Sandra.
Perfect. I remember those days very, very, very well. And, there is something to be said about the traditional way of doing business and doing that running around and how exciting it can be. And, that kind of leads me to remind you guys that digital signatures doesn't have to take away from any of that excitement that we used to feel and that we often still do feel over the course of a real estate transaction. And I'll share with you some stories as we get towards the end of our session of just how exciting even the aspect of including digital signatures and paperless technology into your business can still keep that excitement going. So on top of the convenience and obviously the cost savings that also come along with that, we know now that they are exceptionally secure. You can always be confident in the quality and the authenticity of the signatures that you're getting on your documents, which is super important. Storage, of course. It's going to be PIPEDA compliant. I misspelled PIPEDA there. Please don't hold that against me. Your storage is permanent. So if you get a flood in your house, thankfully you won't have to worry about losing all of your documents because they're going to be stored in the cloud permanently, and often unlimited storage, which again means that you can reclaim some of that storage or some of that space in your hallway that's currently being taken up by filing cabinets. I just had a realtor here in my branch who has been a realtor for more than 40 years, and he decided that he wanted to go paperless. So he took all of his files, and I believe he's sitting at over 30 banker boxes right now, and he's scanning them, and he's very happily shredding every single one of those banker boxes and the contents within them. And it has been so cathartic for him. He has felt such a weight lifted off of his shoulders in terms of the pressure that he was feeling in his office of these accumulating banker boxes. So, that aspect of storage can certainly be really beneficial as well. The confidence, so increased trust and confidence for both you and your clients. Once you get really comfortable using digital signatures, it's really easy to be able to, design them really quickly while you're in the vicinity and in the company of your clients. And your clients can feel confident that you're also adopting the latest technology to make sure that your business with them is as efficient and as smooth as possible as well, which of course encompasses efficiency, which is the next item here on the list of benefits. And tracking. This is one of the cool, most overlooked aspects of digital signatures as well. Most platforms, once you have created a signing session and sent it out to your clients to sign, Most platforms allow you to log in and see in real time at what point the signers are at in their signing session. So you're able to see just by an overview of the signing session whether they've opened the email, if they've created and accepted their signature, if they've started signing, and then ultimately when they finish signing, which is really great because if you find that you're waiting far too long for your client to be signing something, you're able to log in and see, oh, well, it looks like they've signed most of the document, but they didn't get finished. I'm going to call them and see if they need some assistance in getting finished with that. Or you can look and say, they haven't opened it at all. I wonder if they've seen the email, or if I got their email address wrong, I'm going to give them a call and see if they've got it. So that tracking can also be really important and help you move through a signing session a lot more quickly as well. Some of the risks that need to be acknowledged before you ever make digital signatures a part of your business is to analyze the company that you intend to use. Some platforms are targets for hackers, and while I would never say that one is better than another, it is worthwhile noting that because DocuSign is so huge and they have a very strong presence in a variety of industries like medical, finance, insurance, etc., that they are frequently targets for hackers. They have had a number of breaches in the last number of years. You're able to Google DocuSign breach and read all about them. And you need to determine how big of a risk factor that is for your business before you ever decide to choose which platform you want to bring into your business. Is DocuSign secure? Yes, but it is important for you to have an understanding of what those risks look like before you choose the platform that you want. Compliance is another risk. It is your responsibility, if you're going to adapt this kind of technology into your business, to ensure that you have a firm understanding of what the laws are. They can change quickly and often with no warning, at least no warning that reaches you. Sometimes changes can happen and even your provincial council in real estate isn't able to properly or efficiently in a good enough time be able to communicate those changes back out to you. So make sure that you are always conversing with your broker of record or your managing broker or with your provincial governance in order to make sure that you're using something that is compliant and safe for your clients. On top of all of that, of course, brokerage policies also vary. So I do know of a couple of brokerages still in Ontario that refuse to allow their realtors to use digital signatures. Most brokerages, at least in Ontario, and again, unfortunately, I can't speak for the rest of the country, but in Ontario, most brokerages here will allow you to use digital signatures provided that you provide the certificate of authenticity for each of the signing sessions that are present in the deal that you're handing in. So make sure that you have a firm understanding of what your individual brokerage policy is and that you're in compliance with that. That is probably the most important thing. And your lack of understanding or lack of adoption of reasonable technology could also put you and your clients at risk. If you don't have an understanding of actually how digital signatures work or what you need to do in order to ensure that security, you could potentially be found at fault for not having that firm understanding and then, not meeting basic qualifications as you move forward with this. So if you are going to adopt digital technology or paperless technology into your workforce, make sure that you have a firm understanding of how this technology works before you do, just to make sure that you're preventing yourself from making any mistakes. So always choose a platform that comes highly recommended and ensure that they are true digital signatures, i.e. have that extra level of security and authentication that comes on top of just the digital signatures. And to give you an example of what I mean by this, don't just have a PDF open on PDF Expert on your iPad and then hand your client a stylus and have them draw on top of that PDF. There is no security that comes on top of that. There's no authentication. There's no tracking to prove that the PDF wasn't tampered with after their signatures went on. There's no tracking. So that would not be an acceptable digital signature in today's world. On top of all of that, it also needs to be noted that your execution of signatures in the digital space need to be followed identically to how they would be in the real world space. So this also means that at no time do you have any opportunity to place a signature or go through a signing session on behalf of anybody else. So, even though digital signatures are nice and easy to be able to do in person, if it's not your client that's actually doing the clicking on your device, or if you're not sending it over to them in an email and they're the ones that are creating and clicking to place their signature on that document, then you are committing fraud. And it's really important to make sure that you compare that and handle these things extremely, extremely properly. So with that being said, how do we choose your platform? There's a couple of things that you need to analyze in your own business and in your own level of understanding of technology. So first of all, how do you intend to use it? Do you have an interest in moving your business entirely paperless in the next year or two? Or maybe you really prefer working with paper and you actually just want to use digital signatures for those rare occasions that your clients are at the cottage and don't have access to a printer. So you really need to identify how frequently you're going to be using it before you can narrow down which platform might be the best fit for your business. You also, of course, have to identify your level of technological adoption. If you're not, very tech savvy or really interested in adopting some of the latest technologies that are available, deciding that next week you want to move your business from full paper to entirely paperless may not be the right decision for your business. Or maybe it is, but you've got to really identify how you want that to look like before you can choose the platform that's the best fit for your business. You also need to identify your natural flow of business and where you think you might be able to improve. So what are the current frustrations that you have in your business? Is that you are very frustrated with running out at 11 o'clock at night to get those final initials before conditions expire? Or are you really happy with that? Where are the holes in your business that you need to improve, and how could going paperless or adopting digital signatures really contribute to that? You also need to identify your needs. What other platforms and systems do you use in your business? Do you want it to be able to connect to web forms, or do you want a replacement for web forms? Do you prefer to fill out your PDFs, still with a pen on a piece of paper? What brokerage systems do you guys use? Do you use Next One? Because that may make you want to use Repri over using something like Authentisign that doesn't really connect. So understanding that level of connectivity to the other tools that you use in your business is also extremely important. Once you've identified some of these things, the next thing that you have to do is research. And I can't stress this enough. The vast majority of the platforms that are available today have free trials, either for a couple of limited signing sessions or maybe for a week or a month. Make sure that you time block time to activate a free trial and then really spend the time to explore it. I often recommend that people do this after hours, where they're not going to be distracted by their phone or by their family. Open a bottle of wine and really explore some of the tools and the platforms that are out there available for you. Once you've decided on a platform, or even if you've narrowed it down to one or two and you're just not sure, I think I like Authentisign better than DocuSign, I'm not sure, just make the decision and commit. Don't decide just to commit on a month-to-month payment. Buy the entire year up front. And the reason why you're buying the entire year up front is because you're not going to be an expert at digital signatures tomorrow. And here's another question that I want to ask to everybody out there that's watching this afternoon. Do you remember when, and I may be showing my age here because there may be some people that never had this option. Do you remember moving from your flip phone to a smartphone? Do you remember moving like from your Razor to your BlackBerry, where all of a sudden you had that tiny little QWERTY keyboard and you had an email app and you could browse the web? Do you remember how difficult switching from what you had known all your life or for recent years to moving into now using a smartphone? And when you first started using it, you were probably just checking your email and you wouldn't even reply because that keyboard was so dang small. Am I right?
Sandra, you're trying to destroy my chat here, are you? Yes, yep. Yeah.
So now, do you remember even further moving away from BlackBerry and moving to iPhone? And do you remember moving away from that click keyboard and moving into a touchscreen keyboard? Suddenly I can't respond to emails while I'm driving anymore. Like, it was a disaster. I don't know how many of you guys remember back in that day. I know it wasn't even that long ago. I think it was maybe 10 years ago. But, adapting to new technology is a difficult thing. And if you think back to those times and you think about how long it took you to feel comfortable in that massive change in technology, I mean, as tech advanced and as tech savvy as I am, I grew up, playing Atari for breakfast when I was a kid, and always had a piece of technology in my hand growing up. And I can tell you that moving from that BlackBerry touch click keyboard, which I know some people still can't even get away from. Moving into the touchscreen of an iPhone literally took me about 2 months to feel really comfortable with. But it took commitment and dedication and you know, that desire to really want to adapt this new technology into my business. So it doesn't happen overnight, and you really need to make sure that if you're going to adapt this new technology into your business, that you commit and you do it on a regular basis. Because the first couple of times that you try digital signatures, you're going to be so confused. You're going to want to throw your computer out the window. You might be embarrassed if you're doing it in front of a client, but you have to keep doing it. That's the only way you're going to get comfortable working it.
And that's a great analogy, Sandra, too, because you say like a phone, you go, it's not like you could keep the old phone and keep it going as well, right? You were like, no, when I got my smartphone, it was a full-on switch. That phone's gone into SIM cards. You're stuck, and you had that commitment. And that's why we got through it, right?
Exactly. And how many times did we want to go back to that QWERTY, that click keyboard that we had on the BlackBerry? Like, but then once you adapt, you're like, I remember the last time I picked up a BlackBerry click keyboard, and I was like, I can't even do this. Like, the concept of going out of my way to push down on a button just seemed like too much work.
How lazy are you, Sandra? Come on, get it together.
21st century, come on. Okay, so now that you've chosen a platform and you're committing for an entire year, let's talk about getting started. This is often the most difficult thing for people to grasp because it is new technology that they're not familiar with. They feel like it's following a process that is entirely alien and foreign, and they're really not, grasping the flow well enough to really be comfortable with running through it. But what I find is a real eye-opener for a lot of people is to take this process of setting up a signing session and compare it to what you would be doing if you had a pen and a piece of paper and your clients were coming into the office to sign a number of documents. All of the digital signature platforms out there, well, most of them anyway, I can't speak for all of them, but most of them will follow a very, very similar process where they want to identify 5 key factors before you can send the signing session out for your clients to sign. Generally, the first step is you have to identify who you're signing. So again, if you were doing an in-person signing session in your office, you would be setting up the appointment, calling your 2 buyer clients, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, and saying, you're coming into our office today at 6 o'clock to sign 4 documents to write an offer to purchase this property. And now you've identified who is signing. Then you're going to identify when they are signing. And this is a 2-step process where not only are you identifying that they're coming into your office at 6 o'clock to sign, or the email is going to arrive in their inbox, in this case at 6 o'clock, but you're also identifying, when in the process they're going to be signing. So in some cases, you may want to be setting up a signing session in advance of them actually signing. So a way that you may want to do this, for example, is if you are about to go meet your buyer clients at the home inspection, for example, and you plan on waiving that condition or that contingency shortly following the home inspection because you're not anticipating any changes, you may want to set up creating that entire fulfillment or waiver of that contingency or that condition in your digital signature platform before you go to that inspection. And if you can set that up, you're then able to set it in advance so that it automatically gets sent out to them, within half an hour after that home inspection is about to end. There's a variety of different ways that you can set these things up in advance. The next step that you need to identify is in what order do they need to sign. In most cases, I think you probably want to use what some systems called simul sign or sign at the same time. There's a variety of different terms for them. But most of the platforms will also allow you to choose an order. And of course, you have to be careful about this because you wouldn't want to be seen as purposefully putting a husband before a wife if feminine issues are of real importance to that wife, for example. But in some ways that you might want to use this is, for example, if you're setting up a listing agreement and the wife is only signing spousal consent instead of actually signing as an owner. Maybe you want to set up then the husband to sign everything first, and then after the husband has completed signing, then the wife would sign the spousal consent. Another instance that you may want to use this is if a father is helping a child or a parent is helping a child purchase a property, that parent is probably going to want to review and approve those documents before the child goes through and adds their own signature to the document. So in that case would be some of the instances that you might want to control the order in which people sign. The next thing that you need to identify is what they're signing. Generally speaking, in digital documents, this is going to be uploading the PDFs of the documents. So buyer representation agreement, for example, confirmation of cooperation, the offer itself, and any schedules. Obviously, those are Ontario documents. So you need to identify what they're signing. Many of these digital signature platforms, as I said, are approved OREA forms providers. AuthentiSign and Repre are two of those examples where OREA forms are built right into the system. You don't need to go to web forms first or get them from your front desk and fill them out in pen. You can fill them all out right within that platform. Then you're able to identify how many forms, how many pages that those people are signing. The last step in setting up a signing session for your clients is obviously where on the documents they are signing. And this process can be immediately compared. Again, let me know in the comments if this was you. Where on the documents that they're signing. Old school people used to have those stamps with a red circle on them. Does everybody remember those? I still have one here in my drawer. Those awesome stamps that you used to get at Staples, and you would stamp them down on the paper and it would have a red circle, and that's where everybody knew that they had to initial and sign on a document. Some people would just do an X, some people used a highlighter, you had those little sticky tabs that would say sign here. However you used to do it, this is the last process that you do when setting up a signing session. It's important to note as well in these signing sessions that if your client for any reason misses an initial on a page or a signature on a page or the document is otherwise not complete, it's not because they missed one of the boxes that were there. Generally speaking, they can't complete their signing session until they've completed all of the tasks that you set out for them. It's really, really important that you take the time to go through this process when you're setting it up to make sure that you've identified every single place where your clients need to sign and initial and otherwise input information. So take your time through this process. The onus still is on you guys as the realtor to make sure that your clients have a firm understanding of what they're signing and where they're signing and what that means. So make sure that you don't forget that even in the world of digital technology. So a couple of things that I want to make, I want to really make apparent here is, again, practice makes perfect. You will absolutely not come out of this webinar or any webinar having watched it once being an expert in digital signatures. Hopefully after this session, I've got a few more things that I want to share. You feel a little bit more comfortable with maybe tackling them or applying them to your business. But you will not have an understanding of this in one day. It definitely is something that you have to continue to work on over and over again. But once you get it, it will be life-changing in terms of your business. Again, firmly have an understanding of your brokerage provincial policy. Make sure that you have an understanding of the laws. Make sure you have an understanding of what your brokerage requires from you in terms of being able to adapt this into your business. Your chosen platform probably provides training. If it's AuthentiSign, there's a little question mark in the bottom left corner that you can click on. They've got tons of video tutorials. They do provide one-on-one training if you were to call their tech support. DocuSign is the same. I know for a fact that Repre is the same. I'm very familiar with that platform. The vast majority of good digital signature programs out there have extensive training. Make sure that you make use of it. Trust me, it's more interesting than probably your provincial update is for your registration. You can go entirely paperless, and let me share you one of my most hugely successful stories in the last year before I stopped selling. I was offer number 2 out of 5 offers on a $1.1 million property here in Mississauga. I had no idea who the listing agent was. It was a woman from Remax who I know had been in the business for a long time, but I had never done a deal with her. I didn't know her in person. I called her to tell her that I had a signed offer and I was going to be competing in her offer presentation evening. And I said to her, how would you feel about doing this offer presentation digitally? And she said, that sounds really cool. I've always wanted to try doing this. Yeah, let's do it. What does this look like? So before I had ever even stepped foot into her seller's house to develop or to deliver my offer, my buyer's offer, I was already developing a warm relationship with the listing agent, which actually worked out to be in my favor over the course of negotiation. So what I did, I was lucky enough at that time to have 2 iPads in my family, plus my laptop. So what I did is I was offer number 2 out of 5, and I had preloaded my offer in a PDF on both iPads. And then I had created an email while I was sitting in my car outside the seller's house waiting to go in to present. I had prepared an email to the listing agent that also had a copy of the offer. And I also had my laptop open with a copy of the offer. So when it was my turn to go in, I sat down at the dining room table. I gave both of the sellers an iPad that had the offer open. I had emailed while I was walking to the house from my car. I had emailed the listing brokerage a copy of the offer, and I had my laptop. So all four of us were still able to go through the offer together, and we all had our own copy of the offer in front of us, which was fantastic. We presented the offer. I left, obviously, my copy of the offer with the listing agent because I had emailed it to her, so she had it. I took my 2 iPads and my laptop, and I went back to my car. I watched everybody else go in with their folders full of papers, probably 4 different copies of the offer, as we did back then. And when it was my turn to go back in, she called me in. She said, your offer was the strongest. However, we need to change the closing date. Are your buyers okay with this? I said, great, give me a minute. I stepped out into the front porch. I called my buyers. They said, yes, we agree to the closing date change. Perfect. I went back to the seller's table. I told them that we had a deal. Would they mind if we did in-person signatures right here and got it done and dusted? And they said, sure. I was confident enough with digital signatures. I've been using it for over 2 years at that point, and it was a big part of my business. While I was having casual conversation with the sellers about their weather and about their experience listing the property, what's the market like, et cetera, I'm making the changes right within my Repre account. I used Repre back then. Made the change to the closing date, set it up for in-person signatures by the seller and by the listing agent, because of course she had a number of initials and signatures to add to the document. Also sent it over to my buyers who were at home giving their children baths before they went to bed. And literally within 13 minutes, we timed it. Within 13 minutes from the seller saying, it's yours if you change the closing date, we had a final agreed and accepted offer, and everybody felt calm. There was no rushing around. My buyers were able to stay at home and put their kids to bed at a reasonable hour. And it was a wonderfully smooth process for everybody that was involved. Now, again, I wouldn't suggest that you do that until you are extremely comfortable with the platform that you're using. But this is the level of paperless that you were able to adapt into your business. So a couple of questions that I frequently get. What happens if you're working with 2 sellers or 2 buyers and they share an email address? So it's, Betty and Bart Smith, and they share the smiths@gmail.com. Can you still do digital signatures with them? Absolutely you can, but you still need to individualize each person that's signing. So instead of just having, I forget the names of the people that I'd said, Bob and Mary Smith, and then having one entry for them to sign, you want to individualize them as 2 separate individuals. So you would set up a signer as Bob Smith with the smiths@gmail.com, and you would set up another signer as Mary Smith with the smiths@gmail.com. So they absolutely can still share email addresses. You might want to do this yourself using dummy clients like Mr. and Mrs. Smith that I've just used as an example in your own account, and using your own email address as your clients, just so that you can have a firm understanding of the process, what it looks like to your clients, so that you can say, Mr. Smith, make sure that the signing process that you go through is addressed to you before you move through that signing process. So absolutely, shared email addresses are definitely a possibility using digital signatures. Another question that I get asked a lot, and I know some of you asked this when you registered for this webinar this afternoon, can you have multiple signing methods? So what happens if you're in person with your buyers, they sign the offer, you send it into the sellers, and then the next day the seller sends you back a counter offer? Can you have your buyers sign another counter offer digitally when their original signatures have been put in a pen on a piece of paper? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely no problem with that. Again, because the whole process is tracked, their signatures can change as the offer goes back and forth through negotiation. So surprisingly enough, you may be surprised to hear that this also means that your clients, even if they only ever sign digitally, can change how their signature appears from signing session to signing session. So if they originally signed with a stylus, and then the next time that they do the next counter offer, they've decided to choose a font or change their name altogether, perfectly legal, no problems with that. Maybe the seller or the other party might feel uncomfortable with that and they might question that, but it is perfectly legal and acceptable for people to change how their signature appears in between signing sessions. In-person signing is one of the last things that you'll probably want to adopt once you're comfortable with the remote signing. The remote signing you're able to do in your own privacy. So if you get frustrated, you can sort of take a deep breath, go get a glass of water, come back and take another stab at it. In-person signing is something that you should only be doing when you're feeling really comfortable with the platform, because it means that you are physically present with your clients. Yes, of course, you can set this up in advance and then do it with them side by side. But again, the more comfortable you feel, the less chance you have of being caught not understanding what's happening in the process with your client sitting right beside you. So definitely possible. One of the stories that I have with this, and it's something that I do really enjoy sharing as illegal as it is, the first deal that I ever did as a realtor I was working with some buyers who were I'd picked up at an open house, and over the course of the entirety of our transaction, the buyers started to really dislike me, and I really started to dislike them. By the time the transaction had gone firm, we flat out hated each other. I won't go into details about why. It was my first deal. I probably made a number of mistakes, but either way, we didn't like each other. These guys had just moved here to the States, so they didn't have access to a printer. They didn't have access to a fax machine. They were staying in a hotel that didn't really have a business services center. And 2 weeks before closing, or 3 weeks before closing, my branch administrator sends me an email and says, Sandra, you're not going to get paid out on this deal because you're missing the initials on the bottom of page 2 of the agreement of purchase and sale. And my jaw dropped to the floor when I got this email, and I thought, oh my goodness, the last thing that I want to do is show up at this guy's hotel and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to get an initial on page 2. I felt like I was mortified, and there was no way that I was going to do that. But it was my first deal. I really wanted to get paid. So full disclosure, what I did was at home in the comfort of my own living room at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, after stewing about this all Friday night, I wake up, I print out the page 2 that doesn't have the initials on it. I print out page 3 that did have the initials on the bottom. I put page 2 over page 3. I held it up to my patio door, and I traced that guy's initial. And I have no problem admitting it now, because nobody's ever going to come back on me for that now at this point. But
this is recorded, you know that, Sandra, right? This is recorded and going out live on YouTube.
You know, I debated sharing that, but I do share it. And, you know, I have to say that every time I share that story, and I can't see any of you, which is really unfortunate, because every time
I put myself live.
Right? Anytime I share that story with people in a classroom environment, at least half of the eyes in the room drop to the ground, and people kind of look away and their hands sort of go over their mouths. It's shocking how many people have done this at some point in their career. And let me tell you, by no means in any respect at all is that ever acceptable for you to place a signature on behalf of your client, even with their permission. It is simply not acceptable. But a lot of people have done it. So the great thing about security with digital signatures is, you know, at this point now, unless my client was actually in my living room with me at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, chances are he didn't sign that document. So the security and the authenticity that comes along with using digital signatures can save a lot of people from getting in a lot of hot water. The last thing, one of the other questions that I get all the time is, do we still have to put a signature on the witness section in a document? So again, I'm not familiar with the documents across the country, but in Ontario, the final signatures on the offer or the agreement of purchase and sale always have witness places for witness signatures beside them. The answer is no. You should never be putting a witness signature beside a signature that you did not in person witness being placed. So unless you are physically sitting beside your client while they are signing there, that witness spot needs to remain blank. It's never been mandatory, so don't worry about it, but never put a digital signature beside them unless you were physically with your client while they made that signature. One of the other questions that a lot of you asked when you were signing up is about the signing certificates. So I'm hesitant to speak too much on this because I'm not sure how processes or regulations vary from province to province or even from brokerage to brokerage. But again, one of the most important aspects of having a digital signature platform on top of electronic signatures is that certification of authenticity. So for those of you that are familiar with using DocuSign or Authentisign once or twice, you've probably had your broker ask you for that certificate of authenticity. It only appears when the signing session is over, and it has a lot of coding and tech jargon that actually validates the truth of that actual signature. In most brokerages that I'm aware of in Ontario, they absolutely require that for every signing session that your client or the brokerage's client has done. And it's really important to remember that. Do you ever require a signing certificate for the other person's party? And the answer to that is no. Excuse me. Oftentimes we will try and get the certificate of authenticity when signing a mutual release by the other unrepresented or cooperating represented party. But again, you'll have to check with your own brokerage policies on that. Generally speaking, that certificate of authenticity has a lot of identifying information about the other person's client that would be inappropriate for your brokerage to ask on behalf of a client that you didn't represent. So make sure that you're double checking. I think one of the questions that was asked by Sam, Sam, if you're on the webinar this afternoon. Hi, Sam. I think one of your questions was, do we require the signing certificates if we are on the buyer side versus the seller side or vice versa? And the answer is yes, we require those digital signing certificates and certificates of authenticity for every client we represent, regardless of the side that they're on, even for leases. So hopefully that answers your question there. Mike, how are we doing for a conversation in the chat? Are there any other questions that I haven't really addressed that I might be able to?
There's a couple questions that I think that we should address that I think just have come in the past little bit. One of the first ones that that came in is simply around the question about a very simple question, but a lot of people agree that it's a pretty interesting one, is legally, do we have to give our clients a print copy? And that's coming in from Lise Paradis-Noel, who's your community out in Aurora.
Hi, Lise. Yeah, absolutely. It is, again, I can't speak for various provincial laws around the country, but certainly here in Ontario, and I believe it would be a federal thing, a basic contract law, that yes, you have to provide a final copy of every contract that your client signs. But there's no regulation that says that that copy needs to be paper. So most digital signature platforms, with the exception of one, which I'll talk about in a minute, will automatically, one of the reasons why having an email address is mandatory isn't so that they can access the signing session, it's so that the platform can email them a final copy once the signing session is complete. So this is part of the efficiencies of going paperless and applying digital signatures into your business can offer, because this prevents you from having to take that extra step of printing and delivering a final version after everybody has signed, because the digital signature platform will do it for you. Now, we can talk a little bit too about, people working with clients that aren't comfortable with digital signatures. And here's another anecdote that you guys can apply to your business. One of the last clients that I also dealt with was in her 90s. She lived in her home since she and her husband had bought it in 1953 from the builder for, I think it was like $42,000. And now she was selling it for $1.7 million. One of those crazy stories. And she wasn't interested in using digital signature. She preferred to pick up a pen and draw her signature. So I made sure that I brought 2 copies of every contract that I was having her sign. If my signatures were needed on it, then I would sign both copies. I would leave her with one, obviously, and the one that she had signed, I would take with me back to the office. I would scan it, upload it into my paperless transaction management system, and then I would shred that piece of paper that she had put pen to. So you really can move fully paperless, even in a somewhat still paper world. So again, going back to your original question, yes, the answer is you do have to provide them with the final copy, but it can be a digital copy. It does not have to be paper.
Gotcha. And then in terms of that follow-up kind of question on this is, what about the lawyers and requiring signing certificates? And that's coming from David Todd, also from Royal LePage community out in Richmond Hill. I got a couple other questions coming too.
Hi, David. Your community is one of my favorite Royal LePage brokerages. So I'm fist pumping you, but you can't see it. So yeah, I've sometimes found that lawyers have required the signing session certificates that come along with it. But generally speaking, they would usually ask that directly of the brokerage in terms of the flow of paper that goes in between the brokerage administration and the lawyers, and they would provide that over to them. It's not very often that I hear that lawyers want the signing session certificate, but some of them will ask for that, and it would be prudent to pass that on to them. So yes, I don't see a problem with that.
Next question I have is somebody, I noticed that if my emails come in, and maybe this will make more sense to you, if my emails come in on my iPad and computer and I've signed on DocuSign, it does not cancel out one or the other. Is that normal? So that comes from Marianne Povey, Royal LePage, Sussex, out in BC, North Vancouver, typically.
That's an interesting That's an interesting issue, and I think that I'd want to talk to you a little bit more about exactly what's happening there. I'm not sure if I'm answering this correctly, but generally speaking, a signing session is actually only one document. So even though it may be going to multiple inboxes from the same email address, once it's signed, that closes the access of that signing session. With that being said, I have heard of some issues with DocuSign where, in fact, I just saw this on one of the Facebook groups where it's still accessible even after the signing session has been completed and it's not actually closing out. That may be a glitch with DocuSign. So I would want to do a little bit more research and probably call DocuSign support to ask them that question. So I'm sorry I'm not able to provide much more assistance.
I think that's the perfect answer to it is, yeah, get in touch with DocuSign and ask them. They might say, oh, you just got to do this. Sometimes it's as easy as that, right?
Yeah.
The kit which I'm starting in Authentisign will only show here and not in web forms, like my other deals, is the question. And that's coming from Mihaela Nitetscu, who's with Page Real Estate Services Limited on Yonge Street. Does that make sense?
So, Michaela, I think the answer to your question is relatively simple. Since Authentisign and the Toronto Real Estate Board partnered, if you are paying for an Authentisign account, that effectively means that you have two different Authentisign accounts. So depending on where you're logging into Authentisign, you may not be seeing the same kits in both accounts because you effectively have two accounts. Lone Wolf and the Toronto Real Estate, well, not the Toronto Real Estate Board's out of their control, but Lone Wolf have been very hesitant to merge accounts. So you may not have an opportunity to have both kits shared between both accounts. It simply is just a pain point of having a free Treb account. However, they should be able to change which of your Authentisign accounts is directly connected to your web forms account. So what I'm saying is that you may be finding that if you're sending a transaction kit from web forms to your Authentisign account and you're not seeing it when you log into Authentisign, it's probably being sent to your free Treb account. Being that you're in my brokerage, please feel free to reach out to me, and here's my email address, and I'll see if I can help you work through that.
Oh God, if you put that up earlier, yeah.
Flooded by now.
Yeah, exactly. Question, can the spouse witness each other? I think that's more of a signing question, but that's coming from Lise Paradis-Noël out in your community. That should be a quick yes or no there.
They can, but it's entirely unnecessary. The digital signature platform and all of its security effectively acts as a witness in the certificate of authentication. So there is absolutely no need to have a witness signature if the actual person is signing digitally. So you can, as long as you know that they're going to be in the same room with each other as they're signing, but it is entirely unnecessary.
And then one question that's coming in, so around the certificate, which I think is a really good one, should we be uploading the certificate into Next One with all the paperwork signed? And that's coming from Brenda Payne, Royal LePage RCR out in Orangeville.
Hey, Brenda, I would double check with your brokerage policies, but yeah, I'm sure that would be very efficient for them to have that all in the same place by you uploading that into your loading docs. Double check your brokerage policy, but my answer would be a general yes.
And let me see here. One last question for you is just, and I guess this is kind of a recommendation question, but just around what kind of paperless storage do you recommend? And that's coming from, that's Jennifer Anderson, Royal LePage Preferred Realty, and that's in Mission, BC.
Hi, Jennifer, way out in the West Coast. I hope your weather is better out there than it is here.
It definitely is.
In terms of cloud storage, what do I recommend? If you're choosing one of the major digital signature or paperless transaction management platforms, you can rest assured that your storage there is secure and it is compliant. Again, because you're in BC, I would just double check with your managing broker, your broker of record, just to ensure that you're complying with any provincial legislation. Failing that, your G Suite and your Google Drive is also a very reliable place for you to store your documents. And that's why we provide it for you for free. So feel free to use Google Drive as well.
It's all there, exactly. I'm going to just take a quick moment. I just want to thank everybody who tuned into the webinar and remind you guys, I did put the information about the DocuSign as well as the EasyMax, our partnerships that we have with them. You can find that in the Sandra did mention them, but in our DocuSign.com/RLP, we also have EasyMax. I put the number in the chat, 1-844-433-9629. That's of course found in RLP network as well. But those just to make sure that everybody has that as well. But we're getting a lot of people saying thanks, and I want to turn the thanks back to the viewers first. You'll be next, Sandra. but the viewers first, because you know what? If nobody had showed up, it wouldn't be the same, right? The people who are here with us, who are asking these questions, who took the time to ask the questions before we got going, allowed us to really put together a webinar that Sandra, really felt like he will answer the questions that people are asking. And those of you who are sticking around with us, thank you so much. Sandra, my thanks goes to you. You're awesome. You are absolutely awesome. And I really appreciate your time, your sharing. You put that together so well, putting it together, saying like, here's exactly where you start. And to everybody on the webinar, that's kind of the point here is like you said, start and commit and do it. Just do it. Stop forging people's signatures, and I did
never did it after that. I never did it. I felt so guilty and dirty when I did it. I never did it again.
You've got a lot of people on your side, by the way. There are a lot of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. You did mention though, sign up, open a bottle of wine, and then start signing. And I thought, okay, so the idea is you sign up, you open wine, you get really drunk, and then whatever you signed is not really legally binding, right? That's the way it works, right?
Well, I find that liquid courage helps me retain information better. So that's kind of where I was going with that.
Oh, the more positive way. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. But listen, with that being said, I do recommend that people, once they have either opened a free trial or have committed to a platform, that you do a dummy transaction or a dummy signing session using yourself as a client or your husband or your dog as a client or whatever, and go through the process at least 3 times before you feel the pennies start to drop and understanding how the signing sessions work. Don't just do it once and say, this isn't for me, I don't get it, it's too confusing. Really go through it at least 3 times before you decide that it's not for you, because for anybody, I don't care the average age of your client or your level of tech adoption, everybody can use digital signatures, and it can have significant efficiencies in how you run your business.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on a lot. You're saying if you're driving, some of the people in the chat, by the way, is talking about driving 2.5 hours into Toronto to get, so you take that 2.5 hours, put that to learning this, and now you'll save 2.5 hours going forward, right?
And your gas and your maintenance and your time and your sleep if you're doing it late at night like I was doing. Yeah, absolutely.
I got another question. Don't have brokerage policies. So, oh, wow, here we go. Here's an interesting one. So this is coming from, okay, let's see here. So love the program, as do our clients. Have been using DocuSign for years. So don't have a brokerage policy on there. Are there any sample brokerage policies for this kind of thing? And that's coming from, Royal LePage, Ann Hayes, the broker owner of Royal LePage South Country Realty in Oliver, BC. So I don't know, is there a sample? But I mean, a sample might not be valid for Ontario as the rest either.
Yeah, it's definitely going to change from province to province for sure. I hope that Carolyn and Joanne don't hang me for throwing them under the bus or putting them up here, but I would venture to guess that Royal LePage Canada would be very eager to help you as a broker owner determine your own brokerage policy for that. So reach out to the guys at Royal LePage head office, and I'm sure that they'd be happy to help. I don't get in trouble for that.
Go ask it. Well, hey, we had a bottle of wine before we started this, so you can't hold us at anything. So I mean, I think really, I'll tell you, just getting a boatload of thanks. People saying great webinar. Some people are saying you should do this for Aurea as well, which and Rico, Suzanne out in New Liskeard. Suzanne, I mean, Suzanne, I love you. You're awesome, and you're always I talk about you Suzanne, if your ears ever are burning, it's because I talk about you all the time, by the way, and how much I loved going out to your office that first time I went out there. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you so much, Sandra. I'm going to stop the webinar. We can still chat a little bit afterwards. So I'll stop the webinar. And again, to everybody, some people had to tune out, but you can always come back. You can rewatch. You can rewatch the last little section, because I tried to make sure we got to every question. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And feel free to come back. Yeah.